I'm State Senator Shelley Mayer, the senator of the 37th Senate District, which I like to say goes from the Bronx to Bedford, if you're familiar with Westchester. But more important for today's purposes is we are providing this really informational program on the Landlord Rental Assistance Program, or LRAP, as it was adopted by the state legislature. And we have some true experts on the technical aspects of it. And we also have some people who really understand the details of the housing world. So let me just give a little bit of overview and welcome, and then I will turn it over to my partners, to whom I'm extremely appreciative for their partnership and their expertise. So last year in the state budget, many of you on this call know, in April, the legislature created the LRAP program, which was allocation of primarily federal funds to be used for emergency rent and utilities assistance for tenants who fell behind due to COVID. The Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance set up the program, but frankly, in my honest opinion, did very little about it until Governor Hochul took over and insisted that the money go out the door. And thank you to our allies here for pushing with us to get the money out the door. At the same time, we were well aware that the federal law that gave us the money for that program really required the tenants' participation in the program in order to be eligible, even though the money would go to the landlord. And so we allocated in the legislature $100 million in non-federal funds, that's in state money, to be made available for landlords whose tenants did not qualify for federal funding. And then we increased that amount to $125 million in a special session in September, when we extended the eviction moratorium and made some modifications in the eviction moratorium as well to address concerns that we heard from landlords and others. So this program, LRAP, the Landlord Rental Assistance Program, is intended to provide rental assistance for tenants, for landlords whose tenants are ineligible or unwilling to apply for ERAP, including where the tenant has left the property or has failed to cooperate. And we're going to have the details of how the process works. I want to introduce my colleagues in partnership here and really thank them, because traditionally, it was not always the smoothest of relationships between some of us in the legislature and those that represented the range of landlords. And that has greatly improved with the leadership and with our understanding that we need to protect everyone from the impact of COVID. Landlords who legitimately have lost revenue, their ability to pay taxes and their expenses, very, very mindful of that, as well as tenants who we were trying to protect from eviction. And we've been able to work in partnership. So Tim Foley, the executive director of BRI, is here, who's been a fantastic partner to my office in working with us both on policy and individual matters. Blanca Lopez, the assistant director of operations for the county of Westchester, and George Latimer has been a very strong proponent of working with us on getting money out the door. Ron Abad, the CEO of CHI, he's going to introduce his very important organization, which represents both landlords and tenants. Cynthia Fernandez from CHI, who's going to walk us through sort of on the ground details. And I am joined by my counsel, Andy Booter, and my chief of staff, Rachel Estroff. We look forward to hearing questions and answers at the end. But at this point, I think we will start, if you don't mind, Tim, with an introduction from Tim about what BRI has done and their role in this process and in the LRAP program.
Well, thank you so much, Senator. Thank you for convening this, because I know a lot of landlords have questions. Most of them have gotten through the turmoil of applying for ERAP, but LRAP can be a new animal for some of them. So I'm glad they have the opportunity to get their questions answered. We are the Building and Realty Institute. We are a real estate trade association located primarily in Westchester, although also the lower Hudson Valley, including Putnam and Rockland, Dutchess and Orange. And within the BRI is the Apartment Owners Advisory Council, which is specifically an industry group for Westchester-based landlords. We've been in touch with what our members have been going through throughout this whole pandemic, and we're fortunate in a number of respects. It could have been so much worse. After the initial rush of the pandemic within April and May of 2020, which were dismal months all around, most of our tenants, as we understand it, were able to get stabilized. Many of them were able to keep working. Some of them were able to get very generous government assistance to help get them through this pandemic. And we found that a lot of people were able to make rent. We're also fortunate that the federal government provided funding through the New York State Legislature and the New York State budget process for ERAP, which is helping so many of those tenants who were behind, so far behind in their rent that they were never going to make ends meet, were able to get those arrears cleared out. And now that the money is flowing under Governor Hochul, we're seeing a big difference with some of our landlords who are really struggling. But that left a number of gaps. And one of the things that we were always in touch with and communicated to the senator and others were what those gaps are. LRAP fills most of those gaps. The first of which was, of course, income. The federal money also came with federal eligibility, such that it essentially was capped at $71,400 for an individual or $102,000 for a family of four. That's a lot of money in a lot of places, but it's not that much money within the greater New York City area, certainly not here in Westchester. The second gap were tenants who certainly would have qualified for ERAP, but left behind no forwarding address. They moved out. There was no indication that they were going to move out. They were gone. If landlords were lucky, that's all that happened. They just disappeared. In some cases, they left behind substantial arrears as well as damage. We heard from one landlord who's a small landlord. He has 14 units across 7 properties. Not only was he out $17,600 for tenants who had simply disappeared overnight, but they left behind heavy furniture. And one enterprising tenant apparently left with the $673 stove that had been installed in the apartment. So they're certainly not going to be participating in ERAP, even if you could track them down. That landlord was out that money and those damages. LRAP helps him specifically. And then finally, of course, everybody knows that there are issues with tenants who certainly would qualify, but simply don't respond despite repeated attempts. We're very grateful that the LRAP program exists. It doesn't exist in most states. New York has really done right by landlords, particularly small landlords, in establishing it. And we're happy to do everything we can to make it a big success. Senator, over to you.
Well, thank you, Tim, and I'm sorry my internet is going in and out, but thank you for that very good description of the gaps that LRAP is intended to fill and our efforts to do that. So I'm going to turn it over to Blanca Lopez. Blanca is the Assistant Director of Operations for the County of Westchester and works closely with landlords and tenants throughout all the communities of Westchester. So Blanca, we'd love to hear from you.
Great. Thank you so much, Senator. Good afternoon, everyone. Senator, I want to thank you and your staff for creating this discussion, this important discussion impacting landlords and tenants alike. What I want to do is kind of talk to you about the program itself that the state has created, as well as the county's role in the rental assistance program. So as all of you know, the Landlord Rental Assistance Program launched on October 7th, and it is one of 3 program modifications that were made to the original ERAP program as part of Governor Hochul's modified eviction moratorium, which is extended until January 15th of 2022. This law, which was announced in early September, allocates, as the Senator mentioned, $125 million in additional state funding to fund the Landlord Rental Assistance Program, $25 million to provide legal representation to unrepresented tenants facing eviction, and an additional $25 million to assist tenants whose incomes are between 80 to 120% of the area median income. So just to give you an idea of what that means, is that for 120% of the area median income for a family or for a 4-person household, that would be $153,000. In the original ERAP program, only tenants up to 80% of AMI could apply. So the original ERAP program still exists. This launched on June 1st, and it's overseen by the Office of Temporary Disability Assistance. This program, the original program, requires for both tenants and landlords alike to work together and to submit an application through the LRAP portal. If tenants are found to be eligible and approved, they receive up to 12 months of back rent. If they fell behind due to COVID and as of March 13, 2020, they must have their primary residence in New York State. And also, if tenants fell behind in their utility payments, for example, to Con Ed, and as of March 13th, 2020, they can also receive utility arrears payments for that. And for tenant applicants whose income or who is paying more than 30% of their monthly gross income towards rent, they're also eligible for 3 months of rental assistance. In other words, their rent moving forward would be covered as well. And all of these benefits are paid directly to the landlord or management company. It is also important to note that LRAP is available to all tenants regardless of immigration status. So we encourage everyone to apply. As of October 26, OTDA received from Westchester County approximately 4,300 applications since the program launched on June 1st. From these 4,300 applications, they have approved, as of October 26th, 1,243 approved, which totals $17,162,000 approximately. All of these funds have primarily gone directly to landlords or property or management companies. The average payment is about $13,800. And it's also important to note that 904 of these applications were also approved for rental assistance. So those payments total about $4.3 million. Again, that's paid directly to landlords. And the average payment for rental assistance is about $4,800. Before the LRAP program launched on June 1st, the county decided to join the state's program so that way we would provide our federal funds to the state, and that, which total about $40 million, would be allocated for Westchester County residents directly. Having said that, the administrative portion of these funds we are using to fortify our outreach and awareness efforts. This way, the state focuses on receiving these applications, reviewing them, and processing payments, while the county will focus on awareness, promoting awareness and community outreach to all tenant households in need. We have partnered with United Way 211. They provide general assistance and referrals to the local nonprofits that are providing application support. That being said, we have partnered also with 13 organizations, nonprofit organizations throughout the county, one of them being CHI, to provide application support to help tenants and landlords apply for LRAP and now LRAP. And we also hold bi-monthly calls with these 13 nonprofit organizations just to see how they're doing, how many clients they were able to see, what are any challenges that they're facing, and to identify best practices as well, because we know that these best practices will help us guide our decision-making in the future, because unfortunately, LRAP and LRAP is not going to last forever, but we do know that people will continue to fall behind in the rent because there are so many hardships that both tenants and landlords are facing. We have also partnered with Co-Communications, which is a marketing firm, and we've created a series of flyers targeted to landlords, to tenants, providing general information that we have distributed to senior centers, to bodegas, to laundromats throughout the county, because we want to make sure that everyone applies. Whether or not they think they're eligible, we want them to apply and let the state review their application for eligibility. Two of our county departments, the Department of Social Services, as well as the Department of Planning, also play an instrumental role in our outreach. DSS, through its 4 district offices in Yonkers, White Plains, Peekskill, and Mount Vernon, provide application support. So anybody who needs assistance can go to one of the DSS district offices, as well as the nonprofit organizations, and have someone help them, walk them through the application, help them upload the documentation they need, and answer any questions they have regarding the application process. And our Department of Planning oversees the contracts that we have with our 13 nonprofit organizations, as well as provide an informational page on their website dedicated to ERAP. Moving forward, we're creating additional public service announcements. We're also going to release our flyers announcing the LRAP program. And as soon as we receive more information on the legal representation program that OTDA will come out with, we will also provide that information as well, because we want to make sure tenants know that there is legal assistance available if they do not have an attorney. And we're also gearing up our outreach activities as the January 15th date is right around the corner. We want to make sure everybody knows what the process is and where to go to seek help. I can certainly take questions at the end, but I do thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Blanca. Would you just mention briefly the fact that Yonkers was not
Yes.
part of the county program?
Yes,
just
of course.
So our listeners know.
Sure. So I can talk a little bit about Yonkers. So the city of Yonkers, unlike Westchester County, decided to run their own program. They had partnered with 4 different organizations, Catholic Charities, Cluster, WRO, as well as the Bridge Fund to run their programs. And up until, I think, the end of July, early August, they were accepting applications. Because of the fact that they felt that they had allocated their funds to the applications they received, they did close their application process temporarily. They did reopen in September, because we all know that when tenants apply to ERAP or have an application for ERAP, they are protected in terms of eviction proceedings up until January 15th. So as Yonkers tries to figure out if they have spent the entire amount of money that was allocated to their program, we do want to make sure that people know, especially landlords who have properties in Yonkers, that they need to apply for LRAP if they fall under that category directly to the state. Also, if there are any Yonkers tenants whose incomes are between 80 to 120%, they apply directly to the OTDA website as well. So as Yonkers is trying to spend their money, we are going to be meeting with them in the next couple of weeks to see where they are, so that then we can promote and provide awareness to everybody as to when Yonkers tenants can apply directly to the state if they fall under the original program parameters of ERAP.
And I would add, thank you for that, Blanca, that
Sure.
we, the legislature, are making the push and pushing to make sure that when money runs out in these locally run programs like Yonkers, that we can backstop it with additional state money if needed. So I just want to make sure, although we're talking about LRAP, that people understand, because this week I talked to someone who was denied by the state program because they lived in Yonkers and did not know they should apply for the Yonkers specific program, a tenant. So thank you so much for that. Let's turn now to Ron Abad, the CEO of CHI, and I so appreciate you being here and being a partner in this effort, and your on the ground representation of both landlords and that you're both landlord and tenant. So please give us some opening remarks.
Well, first, Senator, thank you for hosting this, for putting this together, and thank you for your strong leadership on this. You know, in the front leadership on this issue for quite a while. So appreciate that you've just been in the forefront as far as advocacy and support, you know, for the entire community, both landlord and tenant. I'm Ron Abad, CEO of CHI, and also good to see Tim and Blanca co-hosting this event. We're great partners on this issue. CEO of CHI, we provide affordable, supportive, and permanent housing, as well as first-time home buyer programs, eviction and prevention, foreclosure services in 5 counties: Westchester, Nassau, Suffolk, Dutchess, and Orange counties. We're at an advantage because we are both a service provider on the eviction side for folks, but we are also a landlord. We own over 250 properties in 3 counties: in Westchester, Orange County, and in Long Island. And over these 250 properties, as being a landlord, we're concerned on the pain points on both sides. And most of our properties are small buildings or houses, and we have tenants as well. And we've been challenged on sort of collecting rents on those properties as well. But I'd like to add Cynthia Fernandez, who is head of property management. She actually knows both sides, directly detailed application process, and I'll pass it on to her.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Shelley, for having us here to talk a little bit about the LRAP program. I do know that some landlords have been helping through the ERAP program, their clients, their tenants, and they've already been able to log in and create accounts on the ERAP system. The LRAP system, for those owners who are out there who have already applied, who've been helping and working with their clients, the LRAP application should be a lot easier because you've already uploaded all your information. You've already uploaded your W-9, your proof of ownership of the property in question. You've already put your banking information where you get your direct deposit money. So it's really just a matter of logging back into what you already do and clicking on the bottom. Instead of adding ERAP application, you're going to add the LRAP application. For those that have not opened an account, it's the first time they're hearing about this and they really want to get active and they want to be able to collect on arrears, well, then you have to go to the otda.ny.gov. As soon as you go onto that website, you'll have two options, rental assistance and landlord assistance. And you'll be able to click on the landlord portion of the LRAP, and it goes through the whole process of what you need to do, what you need to apply, what you need to upload in order to create an actual account. Once an account has been created, and it's very simple, it's just a matter of the property itself that you own. They're going to want your W-9 tax form. They're going to want proof of ownership for that particular property. They're going to want your banking information for any direct deposit accounts. Once you've created the account, then you're able to add an LRAP application. The LRAP application is a lot easier than the ERAP application as far as for tenant purposes. The ERAP, you have to put in all of your tenants' information because you're applying for them and helping them out. And then they have to continue and accept the application and answer all the questions on that end. But on the LRAP, it's simply for you, for the landlord. So you only have 6 tabs that you have to fill out. You have to fill out an eligibility tab. And all that is simply asking you, is your tenant still there or did they move out? And give us the date they moved out. If they did move out and they left owing rent, you just put the date that they left and you go to the next tab. The owner information tab is the tab that's going to have all your information. If you've already uploaded all your info, it will automatically populate there, so you don't have to add anything else. You can double check the information there, make sure that everything is done correctly. Your name, your address, and all that information, your phone number, contact information, email information. They do like to send emails confirming that they received your application, so it's always make sure your email is correct. The third tab is the tenant information, not specific birth date, socials, none of that. All they want to know is who your tenant was, what is their phone number, if any. If they left and it's not a working number, you put with the last contact information you had for them, last email information you had for them. And then it proceeds to the next tab. So it's not a lot of information from your tenant that you may or may not have, or they may have changed it. It's a matter of what you had on record when you first had them as your tenant. You would go to tab number 4, which is the unit information. Where did they live? What location, what building, what apartment number, everything you should have. So kind of prep yourself before you start an application. Make sure you have all the information from your client, whatever is readily available. Make sure you have all the addresses and information from your client. That way you don't have to keep going back and forth. You can just simply submit all the information onto the tabs. Then they'll do a rent arrears tab, which is simply what was the tenant owing you in rent for those 12 months. You don't get 15 months, you don't get 3 months extra for LRAP, you will only receive 12 months worth of rental arrears. So you can start it from if it was in March 2020 and they still never paid you anything and they left you last month, well, you're only gonna get March 2020 through February 2021, whatever is 12 months worth of rent. That's all you're gonna get on that. So you will put those numbers. If it was $1,000 they owed you, $1,000 that was due, that's all you put on each line item. If there's about 12 line items, you have to fill them out individually with the amount of rent that was owed to you at that time. Once that's done, it'll populate on the bottom. It'll give you a total of what the total rent that you're applying for. what they're going to do is go to the next tab and they're going to want required documents. You're going to have your deed for the property. You're going to have the lease. Some tenants don't have leases. Sometimes didn't renew leases. They were just on a month to month. Was there any documentations that the client was still there? What was the last check that they cashed or money order that they gave you? Did you send them a rent receipt? Anything that you have that shows that they were actually your tenant at one given time or not. But the deed of the property is very important. Any lease that you have, I've uploaded expired lease because that's the last lease I had available. Or maybe an agreement. Did you send them an email? Did you have some type of agreement with your tenant to let them know that you were still going to have them as a tenant, even though their lease expired? A ledger. Obviously, property management companies are able to have access to a ledger. If you don't have that, perhaps you can create a ledger or write it down what months they had. Even though we previously did that in the other tab, they still want some type of proof of what the amount that's due. So a ledger is always very helpful, and you upload those 3 things. Those are the only 3 things that you have to upload. So it's kind of easy compared to the ERAP where you have to upload everything. But, there's just so many things you have to upload. And then the last part is just you have to certify the application. Make sure that everything you're writing there is correct and true, and you sign it digitally and you submit. And what you'll have is you'll be able to click on a tab that says LRAP applications, and you click on that and it'll show you what you applied for, what is the address, and how much is technically due, and what is the pending status of it. If it's pending, they'll say pending. If it's being reviewed, it'll say reviewed. If they cut a check, it'll say the amount of the date and the date that they're going to submit it to your direct deposit. So really, it's a little bit time consuming, only just to make sure you have everything that's being requested. But there's only 6 tabs. They're very easy. It's straightforward. There's no it's just a very easy module you can work on, and the portal is very easy to follow up with. So that's my part, and that's what I've been doing with our company at CHI, since there are tenants that won't apply for you and tenants that have left in the middle of the night owing you money. So this is something that's really helpful for the landlords to really get them off their feet. Listen, 12 months is better than no months, and a lot of that really does help the landlords, especially when they didn't think they had any help on some of these clients and some of these arrears. And that's it. And Shelley, thank you so much for having us explain this. If anyone has any questions, just let me know.
Yes. I know there's questions. And my colleague, County Legislator Nancy Barr, is here, and she says, is there a deadline for filing for the LRAP? I think she's talking about. Is there an end date?
I do not have an end date. I didn't see one posted on their website either. So it is.
I don't believe we enacted a closing date on this, and I think that it's likely when we go back in January, we have to consider whether, if all the money is not out the door, whether we ought to make sure that continue to make this money available to landlords who are eligible under the limitations of the program.
Correct.
So I think that's one thing. The other question that I have is, what about a tenant, Cynthia, who is sort of intermittent payment? So you mentioned a 12-month, let's say somebody moved out, for example, in April of 2020, and that's sort of an easy case, so to speak. Then you apply for the 1 year or the 12 months.
Correct.
But a tenant who is intermittent in payment or paid less, but paid something but less than the full amount due over a period of time, is there a way to describe that circumstance?
Yes, there is. Yes, because on the tab that says rent arrears, it asks you what's the true rent. Let's say it's $1,000, and it asks you what's the arrears on that $1,000. So if they paid you nothing, it would be $1,000. But if they paid you $300, then your arrears on that $1,000 would be $700. So there is a way of calculating what the actual rent was, but what they paid into it. So you can differentiate. You can't say they made a partial payment, and then they will only be calculating the partial that's still due.
Okay, so that's on a month to month. You can do a month to month itemization of how much they
Correct.
pay. Yes, okay.
Correct.
Other things, Blanca, you want to add anything, or Ron or Tim, on this sort of the background before we jump into more of the questions? And then we have a few here.
I think Cynthia's explanation detail is incredible, and I appreciate you, Cynthia, and that's why I invited her, and we're open for more questions. I mean, I just have to celebrate her, you know?
Good, good.
I do have a question for Cynthia, actually, because I had heard, does the landlord have to show proof that they've tried to communicate with the tenant about trying to apply in the case for tenants who do not want to participate in the program?
Yes, for the tenants that are still living in the unit, you should make an attempt to steer them through to ERAP. That attempt should have been made twice in writing and once on vocal on a phone call. What I found out the other day was that what happens if tenants don't have the time to be writing letters out to them and letting them know. Emails count as well as text messages. All you would need to do is print them out, screenshot them, and then you could upload them when you're requested. They don't ask you for that, but you are being able to, under the required documents, it does say others, so you do have that option saying, look, this is my part. I did my part. I sent them an email, here's the email. I sent them a text, here's the text. As long as that's the dates, and that's your proof that you made that effort to let the tenant know about the ERAP program. So they will, as long as those are received, they know that you did your part as a landlord.
There's some other questions, but one question I have is, and I think some of my colleagues from the legislature may know this. We fought with the prior commissioner of OTDA under Governor Cuomo to have a landlord hotline so that landlords actually could call OTDA and check on the status. But even if there isn't such a hotline, which I will continue to push for, once you applied, is there a phone number, Cynthia, that you can call to check on the status?
Yep, 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. You call the regular ERAP number, which is the 844-691-7368. So I've had questions on my applications. I've called them, and they can see both screens, so they're aware. And actually, that's the number I've been calling to get the information about the text messages and the emails and trying to figure all that out. So yes, definitely, you could still call them on the ERAP number.
And
What's
they
the number again? What's the number?
It's 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. and it's 844-691-7368.
And they answer the phone.
Correct. Yes, they actually do answer it. Yep.
That's great. So here's some questions. Regarding Yonkers, I have tenants who have applied to Bridge. I have not been contacted at all as the landlord. What steps can I take? I think that's for you, Blanca, probably.
Sure. So you should definitely contact the Bridge Fund to be able to find out the status. Again, this will also be one of the questions that we will include in our conversations with Yonkers, and Senator, we can send you that information so you can also share that with your constituents as well.
That's great.
Blanca,
Yeah.
just let Blanca know, we just got a check-in from Cluster for one of our clients in
Oh,
Yonkers.
wonderful.
So we
Great.
were very appreciative of that. My property manager, Sarah Rodriguez, was working with her. She was running one of the buildings at Willow Street, which is in Yonkers, and she was able to get through, and she stayed constant communication with the program manager there, and he was able to get the check out, and we received it yesterday. So that's a great thing.
And
Good.
each case has a specific confirmation code. So if the landlord has a confirmation code, they can call also the Bridge Fund in case they won't accept the tenant's name or whatever the case may be. But that confirmation code will also provide them with an update of what's going on with that particular case.
So he should call the Bridge Fund.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yes.
And I hear it, Manny Rios is the contact at the Bridge Fund, according to a text I just received. Everybody's communicating at once. If a tenant is not approved for ERAP, can the landlord apply for LRAP?
I do believe they can apply for it because it has nothing to do. It's it's still the landlord that still is owed the money, the rent. And it would be only up to the 12 months, obviously, but they should be able to apply.
If the landlord is eligible under the rules you described, which are
Correct.
going to be set forth in the document, Blanca, that the county is preparing, correct?
Correct.
I think it's FMR no more to exceed 150% of the FMR in that particular unit size. If it's more than that, then they won't qualify either. But if it's less than that, they will.
And just to give you an idea of what that means in terms of the fair market rent, let's say for a 2-bedroom unit, the 150% of the fair market rent would be $2,915. So this is a mock-up of our landlord LRAP flyer that we're going to be releasing soon, but that information is also on our flyer.
Wonderful, and we'll get that out. And I think if you want to make sure you're on our email list to get this information, please enter your email here in the chat so that we can add you. And I would ask that my staff get that. Okay, I'm going to read this question. If I signed up a tenant for LRAP, well, I mean, if I signed up, I think as a landlord, and then later I'm able to get them to register for ERAP. Oh, for example, they're reluctant, and then you can convince them. Can both applications be open at the same time until the ERAP gets approved or denied? I don't want them both to be denied because it may look like I'm double dipping. I understand that. You know, you may have a tenant that is reluctant to apply, and then you ultimately persuade them, but in the meanwhile, you're out the money, so you suggest and you're eligible, you apply for LRAP. Do you know the answer to that, Cynthia?
To be honest, I haven't had that situation occur to me yet. It's something that I could follow up, and if they leave their email, we can send a response. But you should always, on the ERAP program, on the ERAP portion, actually on the ERAP portion, there is a line when you're applying on the ERAP that states if you have other programs that you've applied for, and you have to indicate them there. So let's say he applied for LRAP because she wasn't. When he applies to ERAP, he should be indicating, I applied for LRAP, this amount of money. So that way they don't double dip. Maybe they'll only give his client the other 3 months, 15 months plus the 3 extra months ahead, but they will not pay them the full 15 months. So there is a portion on ERAP to catch that.
Good. That's very useful. I did not know that. Are you able to apply for a tenant who passed away during tenancy and still had an outstanding balance?
I did. Yes, I did. I called the hotline. I asked them, listen, my client passed away in February of the beginning of this year. Is still during the COVID time. Can I apply? And they told me, yes, apply. I said, okay. And I applied.
Good. Okay, you're getting all the questions here, so hang in there.
Yes, I know.
How long does it take to know if an LRAP application was approved?
That I applied for one 2 weeks ago. It's going to be, I would say, probably about 8 weeks, to be honest. That's what ERAP was taking.
Yep.
So it's at least minimum 8 weeks.
Okay, and I know that people are asking about status of as a tenant or a landlord of their ERAP application. And again, I would suggest that people, if you want to email my office, we will try to inquire with OTDA and get answers. I just want to commend Governor Hochul and her staff because we had a hearing at the very end before Governor Hochul took control, and we really grilled the commissioner about the excuses for why this whole program that we fought for in the legislature did not get going. And we frankly got a lot of malarkey, is a nice way to put it. And then Governor Hochul basically said, I'm not going to accept this and we're going to make it work. It doesn't mean it's perfect. It doesn't mean that it meets every need, but this money is finally getting out the door. So I just want to commend her leadership. Okay, what can be offered to help a tenant who got assistance with past due rent and is getting a portion of their rent paid moving forward, but they still can't pay their portion of rent? And now my hands are tied, meaning I can't take legal action. I think that's a moratorium because you're accepting the ERAP money, but you're not getting the balance of what they owe. You want to?
With the ERAP money, they were supposed to, one of the one of the criteria is you're not going to evict your client for up to a year, and you're not going to increase the rent. I do think that if they fall behind again, as far as owing money, I think you still allow the process to start legal,
Yes.
but you can't evict them for that first year. Yeah, I mean, that's what you signed up for. You know, as a landlord, if you were really behind in the rent and they were able to catch up all their rent, but they still couldn't this point forward, then that's something that should have been thought of before accepting the state money, because now you are put in a predicament where you have to keep them housed, because that was the deal in order for you to take that money.
Cynthia, Senator, we can't proffer legal advice or anything. We could sort of
Yeah.
address the application process, but not, I don't want to put anything out there that
Yeah.
seems to be legal advice, because we just can't. Okay.
Yeah.
I do want to add to that, Senator, that if the tenant may be income eligible for rental assistance through the Department of Social Services, that might be a possibility. Certain organizations also receive money if they are located in consortium communities. So they might have some CDBG or emergency solutions grant money. Again, all of these funds have specific criteria to it, but local nonprofit organizations should be able to ascertain what other sources are there. But that is a problem, and that is something that it's impacting a lot of people. The fact that if they cannot afford the rents, they should be paying 30% of their monthly income towards rent. And many of our households, up to like 80% of our households, are paying even more than that, much more than that. So that is an issue that we are dealing with, as you know, at the county, at the state, at the country level, in terms of affordability of rents and home ownership also as well.
True. I'm going to skip to, this is a good question, and I'm trying to be selective on ones that we haven't gotten to. We have an ERAP pending review since August 1st. The application was submitted June 25th. The tenant owes over $25,000. Every time we call ERAP, they say it's under review. Nobody provides answers. Is there greater, I mean, that's one, Bridget, you can reach out to our office and we'll try to get OTDA to get a speedier answer. I think one of the things that happened, as I said, is people applied when the program started, but nothing happened in the agency. So they are backlogged. That's not an excuse. Let us, feel free to email my office and we will try. I think Marianne from my office is on here and we will try to get a speedier answer. My tenant was approved for ERAP about 2 months ago. I call almost every week and told the amount approved and the months approved, but they've been saying that for the last 2 months. What options do I have? Again, these delays in getting answers, we will put pressure on OTDA to try to get better answers on that. Does it matter if you had started a proceeding in court? And again, as Ron said, we're not giving legal advice. And I would note that a lot of my friends who represent both landlords and tenants are on this Zoom, and I'm sure they have their own opinions about various things. But does it matter if you had started a proceeding in court to evict based on holdover rather than non-payment, even though the tenant was not paying? I'm going to defer that to one of the landlord or tenant lawyers for a separate discussion. This is very much focused on the LRAP, administration of LRAP, which hasn't gotten enough attention. And that's why I'm glad we were able to do this and we have so many people participating. Now, with respect to LRAP, Blanca and others can confirm, this is not a program where a municipality like Yonkers could opt out. In other words, if you're a landlord in Yonkers, as you pointed out, you can apply for LRAP through OTDA, the state's website. You're not required, you don't go through the city's separate program for ERAP. Correct.
They apply directly to OTDA's LRAP portal. Yes.
Okay. Good to know that. And then Cynthia, of the applications, you've submitted some number of applications to LRAP since it opened, correct?
Correct.
And you've gotten some answers or on approvals yet, or haven't you?
No, not as of yet. They just opened on October 7th. So you figure you have to give them at least 8 weeks But I'm just continuing applying, and any tenant that I see that's not making the effort to apply for herself won't do the ERAP portion of it. There are towns, even in Long Island, where they when you look on the actual OTDA page, you'll see that they're not taking application for, let's say, Brookhaven and Islip anymore. So there are certain areas that they don't have the funding for. They do have other areas that they still do. Some of Nassau, some of Suffolk, a lot of upstate New York, they still have a lot of funding for through the ERAP program. But the other ones, I was told by the hotline a few days ago, if it's a program that does not have funding anymore, apply the LRAP, apply for it. So that's what I intend to do for those clients that don't have that option anymore, whether they're late or they missed the boat.
Okay, here's a good question. If I allowed the tenant to terminate the lease early because the tenant could not continue to pay rent, and I could not find a new tenant for 8 months, so the apartment stayed vacant, am I eligible for 8 months of lost rent?
That is a question I would have to find out for you. That's a very good question.
Yeah, I don't know whether you're eligible if there's
Yeah.
not a tenant at
Cynthia,
all.
that's not for us to find out. It's a larger question. So we,
Yeah, no, I'm just saying that, you could always call the hotline and they may be able to assist you in that to see if that's something that they're getting extra funds for, but I wouldn't know that. That hasn't happened to us yet.
We can add that to the discussion with OTDA as well, Senator, because
That would be very helpful. And I know, I see Ken Finger has some questions about the eviction moratorium, which I, respectfully am not focusing on here. We've had a number of conversations about that. I won't go into it in depth, except to say that there was an effort by the legislature, myself and many of my colleagues, to try to modify some of the provisions of the prior moratorium to reflect some of the on-the-ground experiences of landlords that we knew were problems. But this is really focused on the LRAP, so respectfully, I'm gonna go on that. Can you put the phone number for the hotline in the chat is another point here. That would be helpful, I think. Tim, can you talk a little bit about your experience with how landlords in BRI have managed? And you and I had a conversation about a significant number who have really tried in good faith to negotiate or work with their tenants, the vast majority of them, and that they were able to receive at least some money during the worst of COVID before people had the opportunity to go back to work. Do you have any data about that? Did we lose him?
I think we lost him.
yeah, I think we lost him. I don't see him.
Oh, okay. So
he muted himself, so he might be having trouble.
okay, I think, all right. Well, I mean, I do want to say, because I know there are landlords here and many landlords, the vast majority in our experience made a good faith effort in the worst days of COVID to work with tenants who had lost their jobs and to either, reduce or to modify or put on the back end. The rent obligation continues under the law. It's not eliminated by anything we did. The person still owes rent. We never remove the obligation to pay rent. But I do want to commend landlords and tenants, because the vast majority worked together to try to find a compromise so that people were not evicted, which we were very legitimately and continue to be concerned about. As the economy recovers and people can go back to work, we're confident that, or I'm confident that we'll find a path forward. We recognize there's this arrears problem when people weren't working and the worst of it hit. And these two bills, both the ERAP and the LRAP, are efforts to address that really the best that we can. But to the extent that you have additional suggestions of things we should do legislatively when we go back, I'm always open to hearing from anyone, landlord or tenant, and seeing if the particulars that you raise cannot be addressed. Not one-offs, as I would say, not one case to amend a statute for that, but if there's a general problem that we need to address, we want to hear from you. So please don't hesitate to let myself or my staff know if there's things, even in the program, for example, assuming LRAP continues, that ought to be modified. But I would say, Cynthia, you've given a sort of a pretty upbeat presentation about, one, the ease of applying, and two, hopefully that the money's going to flow and that this will benefit landlords for whom it was, whom was intended. So I appreciate your sort of spirit of this is a good program and we're going to make it work, because that was the goal of when we did it.
Thank you.
If we need to add more money, that's another thing that, again, we expect to hear from the landlord community, that if the money runs out, that we need more, and then that's something we will have to go back and fight for. Are there additional questions? I know, as I said, I did skip over the ones that deal largely with the moratorium. Or things people want to add. Blanca, Ron, Cynthia. I know, I'm sorry, we lost Tim in here.
Sure, just one thing to add, and I'm not sure if Cynthia covered it. That's when the program launched October 7th. They are giving priorities to landlords with 20 units or less for the first 45 days. So they're reviewing those applications first. And then once the 45 days is up, then they will be reviewing the other applications as well. So I just want to make sure people understand the priority for the first 45 days is for units, 20 units or less.
Yeah, for buildings that are 20
Yes.
units or less. So if you have a building that has 60 tenants in there, they're going to prioritize like the single family homes more, the 2-family homes, the 3-floor walk-ups, things that are under 20 units. They'll prioritize that for the first 45 days, which is another week or so. And then afterwards, they will continue with the larger units.
Okay. So 2 things. One, we were asked about whether this would be available later. It will be on YouTube, and we'll make it available. So one question, not an LRAP question, but a utilities ERAP question. And maybe Blanca, you know the answer to this. So a Yonkers tenant paying rent, but needs help with utilities. So ERAP does help with utilities, but you'd have to apply under the Yonkers program, I suspect, but.
Correct. So the state's ERAP program, you have to be behind your rent. And then also if you are behind in the utilities, then you would apply that way. But if she's City of Yonkers, I think the Yonkers program is different in that they don't necessarily have to be behind their rent. But again, if she falls within the same criteria as the original ERAP parameters of up to 80% of AMI, then she has to wait until that list or submit that screening application, whatever phase Yonkers is in right now, in order to apply for her utility assistance right now.
I believe on the City of Yonkers website, there's some discussion of how to apply. It's administered through the planning department, but it's
Correct.
through the agencies that they've made, have contracts with. So again, if you have questions about that, you certainly can call our office and we'll try to direct you to the appropriate agency in Yonkers that is doing that. And then to the extent that there's additional resources available for Yonkers, if needed, we will provide additional update on that as well. Any other comments? Ron, you want to add anything before we close?
Sure, Cynthia, thank you for your great presentation. And Senator Blanca and Tim, CHI will continue to be a source of best practices and support. As we continue to go, we'll be able to share with you, Senator, our experiences, et cetera, with Cynthia moving forward, and be a source of support for all the landlord community. If you can reach out to me directly or Cynthia, and we'll take it from there.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. I would note, I know that people are signing up for the newsletter. That's really to go to the county. Blanca, I'll make sure those go to you. I would say, I know that certainly there are tenants on here as well as landlords who have legal questions. And as Ron said, we're certainly not giving legal advice here. I would say for tenants who need legal representation, there are agencies available if you're income eligible or certain under guidelines to provide assistance. And I know a number of the landlords have representation, very good lawyers here. We steer away, we're not capable of giving legal advice to individuals, but we will try to refer particularly tenants to one of the agencies that provides legal advice. like Legal Services of the Hudson Valley, if you're income eligible and they're able to handle your case. Let me see if there's anything else here that I have. One new message. Soon we're going to cut off the messages, but oh, these are newsletter requests. I will do those. I'm sorry that we lost Tim in this process, unless he's returned, maybe not. Anything further, Cynthia or Blanca?
Just thank you for this opportunity. I think it was necessary to have this discussion on LRAP.
Yeah.
I think we may need to do it a follow-up as we move ahead and see how it rolls out. We're early in the process. And I think a lot of people don't know how it works. So thank you, Cynthia, for giving us sort of an on-the-ground tab by tab, as you did,
No
explanation.
problem.
Really useful. And I think you will be a great resource. Is it okay if you put your contact information here? Ron, can we share Cynthia a little bit?
Just CC me if you don't mind, you know?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
You want to put both our email addresses?
Yes, is that okay?
Yeah, I'll put it on here.
Thank you.
I mean, Cynthia is not a resource for all, but she's certainly the most knowledgeable here, so we'll give her that. And thank you to our partners for presenting. Thank you for so many people being interested. We will get the flyer that the county's putting out certainly from myself, and we'll get it out to everyone else. And we'll make sure Blanca has that. And Blanca, if you put your contact information here, I think that'd be helpful. She's a fantastic resource on housing issues.
Yes, you will.
Thank you. Anything else? I want to thank my staff, Andy Booter, who my counsel helped put this together, Emily Lavin, my communications director, Rachel Estroff, my chief of staff, Marianne. Whoops, I'm losing everybody here. Marianne, my constituent director, who's a fantastic lawyer as well. So thank you all for putting this good program together, and we will share it going forward. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.